Hello, welcome to the AWS Summit and the BrightTALK stand here at the exhibition hall in London's Excel. My name is Alex Hilton, and I am the Chief Exec of the Cloud Industry Forum, a UK-based IT trade body, talking about all things cloud. I'm joined today, though, in our Ask the Expert session by Mark Cranney. Mark is the COO of SignalFx. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Alex. Great to be here.
Welcome to London.
It's always fun to be in London.
Do you know, it was a beautiful sunny day a couple days ago and you brought the rain.
San Francisco, we always have some of that. Similar weather.
Okay, well, I'm sorry it's a bit miserable here for you today. We'll try and change that for you.
We'll be all right.
But you're very welcome and it's good to see you here. Your first trip to the AWS Summit?
The London one, yeah, I don't think I was here last year, but we do a lot of these, so we're busy.
Yeah, absolutely, I'm sure. Well, it's all just kicking off today, of course. We're early morning here. So we'll have a chance to wander around in due course and see what's what.
Come by and see a demo.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so Mark, it's great to have you here. So firstly, tell me a little bit about yourself, about your background, your experience, and so on.
Well, today I joined SignalFx about 2 years ago, the COO, and an interesting scenario. I was on the venture side, so I was part of a venture capital firm that invested in SignalFx, so I worked with the company for several years before crossing back over to the operating side. So I was with a company called Andreessen Horowitz, or a venture firm.
Right.
Andreessen
Horowitz.
Big firm. Yeah. So I got to work with them for several years, so I got a good long look, helping them kind of get into market in the early days from the investor side. When they're kind of ready to scale, I jumped over to the operating side and had a good time since. So
kind of poacher turned gamekeeper kind of thing there. Is it something going on there as you?
Yeah, I kind of got to pick my spot.
Right,
so,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. So what made you think SignalFx? What was the appeal there in terms of that
well, there's
business?
a lot of interesting genealogy of the company.
Yeah.
My background, I joined, I moved from Boston. I was with New England's largest software company in the late 90s, early 2000s, a company called PTC in the product lifecycle management space. And I was recruited by a couple gentlemen out of Silicon Valley, Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. They had founded a company called LoudCloud. It was kind of AWS before the cloud, and they built this hosting managed services business. Had a lot of IP they built into it, and they kind of hit a wall during the dot-com bust in the early 2000s, and they'd refactored the company. They sold the services business to EDS, respun the company back out as an enterprise software company called Opsware, and brought me in to build out their field. So when that happened, there was the guys running the monitoring stack for LoudCloud. One of them moved on and became our chief architect at Opsware, a guy named Phil Liu. And the other one, a gentleman by the name of Karthik Rao, he left LoudCloud and went and joined this young lady in the Valley in Palo Alto called Diane Green. Diane Green was the co-founder of VMware. Yeah. So Karthik ran product for Diane for several years through their IPO. Phil was our chief architect at Opsware. 4 years later, we sold the company to HP Software. Ben and Mark went and founded a venture firm, Andreessen Horowitz, or otherwise known as A16Z. And Phil and a big crew got recruited into this other company called the Facebook, 2007. And they got recruited in to build the monitoring stack in the early days of Facebook. And they kind of learned a lot of things along that way. It was kind of the early days before they called it DevOps, before there's the term microservices, but a developer could come in at Facebook and write some code, introduce it directly into production environment, multiple times a day. So that was kind of an early wave. Kind of fast forward to late 2013, 2014, Phil and Karthik get back together after they'd had these two separate journeys and founded SignalFx. So it was the early days of microservices, DevOps, was starting to become more prevalent in the industry, and it was also about the same time that Docker came out, so the whole container thing. So they had the opportunity to kind of, from a clean sheet of paper, go create this whole new monitoring stack for your infrastructure, microservices, and your applications.
Well,
so.
I guess with that in mind, and well, we're on this monitoring section. Tell us a little bit about SignalFx in terms of what the business is, what you do, so the audience can get a perspective and understanding around that. So
yeah.
Quite special.
So SignalFx is a real-time monitoring solution built on a massively scalable streaming architecture, which is extremely unique. To monitor your infrastructure via a metrics platform. So we ingest metrics and traces from your application, your custom code, going across your infrastructure into this streaming architecture. We metricize things, infrastructure, application, up through your digital key performance indicators. And then if you think of that kind of as a north and south stack, then left to right or east to west, from an application standpoint, all the code that's going across in a microservices distributed environment, we have this thing called this no sample tell-based architecture where we ingest your entire set of traces and spans that are going into your system, and then we do a lot of analysis behind the firewall and only send into our SaaS service what's anomalous. So what this gives you with our metrics platform is a really quick mean time to clue if something's not working right, and then a way with our microservices APM solution of pinpointing where you might have issues in your code and or in your infrastructure to go fix those or automate those as you're introducing more and more code into your environment.
So I mean, this is an obvious question I'm setting you up for clearly, but why is it so important to monitor everything in the cloud?
Softballs are fine. They don't play softball here though, right?
Rounders.
So, okay. Why is it so important to, so from an industry perspective, I mean, there's different use cases. I mean, if you kind of think of a high level initiative-wise, whether you're a Global 2000 or a born in the cloud, high-tech company, you probably break it down into three major buckets. There's, customer-facing type initiatives, a lot of companies, working to get, around DTC or direct-to-consumer. 4 nines is very, very important, to be up. And that customer experience and the brand, and when you're particularly in an e-commerce situation or a SaaS type situation is extremely important to be able to see what's going on in your environment, infrastructure and or application in real time, within seconds. Most of the legacy type tools out there, that are built on old monolithic stacks, just aren't built for the speed and the change that's happening in a microservices, containerized or ephemeral type situations. So other high level initiatives, might be more in the product development side, the constant new product introduction with microservices, with DevOps, where you're changing the code very quickly, or containerized situations where the whole application is changing maybe weekly, maybe monthly, maybe even daily. Some of our customers, their whole application just turns over via containerization on a daily basis. So to be able to identify a problem, pinpoint what it is, fix it or roll it back in real time is super critical. Brand standpoint, from a revenue standpoint, top line, bottom line, and or operational efficiency standpoint as well. So
I got a list of about 400 questions that's prompted for me here, but
we'll give you 40.
We'll come to those, okay. Let me just step back, I guess, up a little bit in terms of looking maybe more strategically, more holistically at the cloud market. Obviously you're primarily US based, I know you travel a great deal. Give me your perspective of maybe what you're seeing happening in the US and how you think things are happening in EMEA, and I know your EMEA team's developing and so on at the moment, in terms of the cloud journey. Where are customers on this journey? You've talked a lot about microservices, containerization. Those are clearly big things that are moving now.
Yeah, there's, even in the US, West Coast, East Coast, middle part of the country, but you come over to Europe, and it's the UK, Northern Europe, Benelux, Norway they're very advanced, particularly in the high-tech, born in the cloud verticals. Depending on the vertical, fintech is very advanced here. Gaming is probably more advanced in a lot of ways. Gaming, you get the gambling opportunity over here, which we're working on, and we were just talking about politics before. That'd be funner, but but I don't see a lot of differences between the two. It depends on which area. You get over to continental Europe, it's probably a little behind in Germany than over here on the other side of the pond. But
okay.
I'm super excited about the acceleration of not just the adoption of cloud, but OSS adoption on top, and then this microservices adoption, DevOps, and the power of new product introduction is I think people, it's a wave that's starting to hit the shore.
Right, and that's kind of leads me into my next question for you. You talk about this wave, and we're talking about containers, Kubernetes, and so forth. How big is this at the moment? I mean, to me, I do a lot of these types of events and so on. Everybody's talking about it. How many are actually doing it? I mean, how big is it really right now?
Yes, we find, I probably break it up into 3 buckets. We
Yeah.
find our customers and prospects in 3 buckets. We find, the first stage is you've got a lot of on-prem, monolithic type applications. They're experimenting, they're starting out with one of the clouds, AWS, or maybe a multi-cloud, depending on different use cases. You might see a little more big data intensive with the GCP, but on the e-commerce type situations, it might be more AWS. So they're experimenting. They start to chop up their applications a little bit. After they've lifted and shifted, and they start to experiment with microservices, a handful. You get up to a dozen or so, and when the executives finally make the big leap and say, look, we're going to go all in on the cloud, that's where it gets super interesting, where they start to refactor their applications, or they're building out completely greenfield type applications in a pure cloud native way, with microservices, with the process of Agile and DevOps, and then introducing technologies like containers or serverless for more bursty, elastic type loads, like for e-commerce type situations. So depends on the vertical, depends on companies in the vertical. G2000 I put in one bucket. My just guesstimate is 700-800 out of the 2,000 are getting pretty far down the path, and at least on their digital customer facing side. Some of them are working their way back through their supply chain or design chain. And the high tech vertical, it's interesting what's going on there too. Even the born in the cloud companies that have, SaaS companies, e-commerce companies, they're dropping and chopping. They're refactoring, lifting it, they're less lifting and shifting, they're changing things up. What we're seeing happen with containers, service meshes, as well as things like Lambda, we're at AWS here today, so are pretty exciting. I've seen some customers that are going from 20, 30,000 hosts down to 2 or 3 or 4,000 hosts and packing 100 containers on them. That's a big shift. Now this is more high tech type situations where they've dropping and chopping, but that's pretty exciting. So that creates a whole new set of challenges from a monitoring and an analytics standpoint than what you're used to in the past, where you had a monolithic type situation and a waterfall type software development where you're only changing the code every once or twice a year. Now it's several times a day. Everything's turning over. It introduces
with the agility of it.
Change and complexity and elasticity. Just a different set of challenges.
And how far down a kind of a size of business stack can you go? You talk about like Global 2000 or so, but we get into this kind of SME, SMB kind of marketplace here, the mid-market customer. Is there a sweet spot you go, probably
our
now?
sweet spots are the larger, further, I mean, we can help a customer, a G2000 that's lifting and shifting, boom, within minutes we can go light up with our infrastructure product and give them pre-built charts and pre-built alerting and accurate alerting on this new cloud infrastructure, and then give them a path that's future-proof for those next generation things they're going to lay on, containers, Lambda, microservices, things of that nature. On the high-tech vertical, it starts pretty early. I mean, we go very, very small from a size of company standpoint. A seed or an A-round type company is a good target for us as well, all the way up to a G2000 or the largest tech companies out there. So,
one of the things we were talking about beforehand was, and I appreciate you've got to be a little bit careful around this in terms of customer names, but any stories you may have of where you had success stories or clients who you can name or who remain anonymous perhaps for more obvious reasons. Have you got anything you can share with us?
Yeah, we just announced a new customer here in the UK, a company called CloudReach, a great, well-known managed service and cloud services provider. that we're super excited about. They have several hundred customers that they're helping, particularly in the G2000, manage their cloud native journey from an MSP standpoint or a consulting services standpoint, and we're the standard now for their managed services product line, so we're super excited to be partnering with them. A lot of, we got a great, great examples of e-commerce companies in footwear and apparel, companies doing, Black Friday type events or multiple product launches that are only going to last a few minutes using things like Lambda to burst up and down, where our solution is really the only thing that can give them that very fine-grained resolution to see how things are performing. And companies that have gone from, maybe having a few dozen or a few hundred in some cases in a war room for a product launch to a few SREs, right? So the financial impact and ROI and of just from taking costs out and is very significant. The other thing that's super interesting there is it allows them to do more new product introductions, right? And to get their brand out more and to do something extremely unique. On the FinTech is another very exciting vertical. We have some super exciting customers in there in Silicon Valley, big software companies. It's really across the board. It's just, if you look at the companies that are furthest along in cloud adoption, cloud native adoption, I can show you examples across our entire customer base in pretty much every industry. Even government and financial services are starting to move out pretty quickly.
This kind of feels like, cloud's growing up a little bit here, doesn't it?
It's exciting, yeah.
We're almost beyond an adolescent perhaps now, and you've got monitoring tools and software and technology that's allowing us to make
putting some muscle on the
decisions.
bone now,
right,
yeah. Actually starting to act like an athlete.
Absolutely, obviously. Here we are. How strategically important is SignalFx to your clients, to your customers that you've got at the moment? So you're more than just a tool set, I'm guessing here, aren't you, with the description you're laying out?
It's a platform, and we're ingesting all your metrics and your traces from your applications into one unified platform, eliminating the need and creating a lot of white space from a lot of point tools. A lot of the legacy solutions are built on batch type architectures. They just can't handle the ephemerality and the complexity of this microservices environment. So it's super strategic from an new product introduction standpoint, from a cost standpoint. The reducing the amount of downtime is super critical. And probably the other thing that's super interesting is, in our most advanced customers, we're their second largest spend, outside spend, next to, guys like AWS or Azure or GCP. So if you think in history, when you're doing we've been in this world for quite some time, when you're doing your budgeting with your data center and your infrastructure, you're typically going to go spend, 10, 15, 20, 25% on systems management. It's the same thing here. And the other thing, we're cloud agnostic. We can work on any of the, even a private cloud and or your on-prem environment. We can help our cloud partners get loads over to, like AWS here, get loads over from the on-prem environment, see how they're doing, here's the lift, here's the shift, how are they performing, and accelerate that process too. But our most advanced customers, we're up there from a strategic standpoint and spend. So, that's cool. Exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. One of these phrases that I know you have used a little bit, which I'd love you to expand on a little bit, is the concept of this software eating the world type of thing, if I've got that right, okay?
Yeah.
Tell me what your understanding, perception is of what that's, how that's meant and how you play in that space, right?
Yeah, Mark Andreessen penned an op-ed, I don't know what year it was, 2010, 11, something like that, about the disruption of industries based on software.
Yeah.
And you've seen it play out across all the verticals. Retail, obviously, you're seeing it, even into financial services, government. So the exciting thing, the software is eating the world, meaning, whether it's a direct-to-consumer type initiative or customer experience or customer intimacy, operational efficiency with just taking costs out. It's going to be hard to outspend and R&D and outperform AWS, Microsoft, and Google. Roll in your own infrastructure in a data center environment. anymore, right? So use that, all the abstractions, the value's starting to move up stack in things like this microservices development type environment, DevOps, and be able to introduce new functionality to what's going on in your business, whether it's behind your firewall, whether it's customer facing, whether in a manufacturing situation it's IoT with autonomous type whatever. It's across the board. I mean, there's not an industry where software isn't disrupting things. If you look at, it's a big year from an IPO standpoint, you're seeing it across both the consumer and the enterprise, what's going on in there. And even in the more advanced companies, again, these born in the cloud companies, there's a lot of change going on in this architecture, moving to true cloud native to give them more agility, more elasticity going forward.
So one of the big discussions we've certainly had here in the UK, and I guess this will be the case in the States as well, is the digital skills gap, okay? So
yes.
Arguably the millennials, they don't like these ways that we pigeonhole people in different age groups, especially because I'll be in one of the negative age groups somewhere.
Yeah.
But this digital skills gap is an issue, okay? Have we got the right skills in the workforce to prepare for the future, to utilize, to help manage cybersecurity issues, containers, et cetera, et cetera? What do you think, and how do you respond to this skills issue that exists in the market?
Yeah, I mean, we were having fun talking politics before, but I think it needs, the best way to address it is early, extremely early. I mean, and without getting too political, I mean, getting into the beginning, I mean, why isn't computer science a requirement? Just like math and English
absolutely.
And academia.
Yeah.
So if I was the prime minister or
the president
or the dictator for a day, I would just solve that very, very quickly. In the States, we're seeing it being done. A lot of education, public education is done at the state and local level, and certain states and or cities and counties and they're funding the private education are starting. You used to have shop class, right?
Yeah.
They're replacing that with the engineering type, STEM type programs, and some of it's coming from private funding. So now you're trying to address it late. It can be addressed late as well, right? And look, the tools and the things are easier to work with. So picking those up later, if you're on a little further down the line on your career, I mean, it's definitely doable as well. So maybe not for me or you.
Yeah, I think that's where you were aiming that one. Mark, I can't believe it. These guys are telling me time's up. I'm really enjoying our conversation.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, you are so welcome.
Thanks,
Any
Alex.
final messages you want to give to the people here?
Why
Why buy SignalFx, eh?
Yeah, hey, we're real time, we're fast, it's real time. So you're not going to find anything out there that can help you manage your infrastructure your applications.
I look forward to welcoming you in the Cloud Industry Forum as well. So thanks again, Mark.
All right.
Thanks very much for the audience. I hope you've got some value out of that, and speak to you again soon.